If I had to briefly summarize the lesson of today's agenda item on Ukraine, I would say that even Europe's own rules no longer matter. Brussels is prepared to break every existing rule just to drag the entire European continent into war. What prevails here in Brussels can only be described as war fanaticism. In practice, Brussels and a few other European capitals have decided that the European people will pay for the functioning of the Ukrainian state, the arming of the Ukrainian army, and the wars. We have now reached the point where there is talk of building arms factories in Ukraine. This is delicately referred to here as an investment in the Ukrainian military industry, which is supposedly the best investment in Europe's security. But this is obviously a nonsensical assessment. The people in Brussels want us to relocate the European Union's military training mission to Ukraine. This is a risk of escalation that would put Hungary and the Hungarian people in grave danger. Therefore, Hungary has not agreed to this, of course, and will not agree in the future to the European Union conducting a military training mission on Ukrainian territory. There is very serious intent and pressure to do so. But we have resisted this to this day. They would spend 46 trillion forints to arm a country that borders Hungary. That is not part of the same integration as Hungary and is not a NATO member, and they want to send 80 trillion forints to a country where corruption is organized at the state level, where a war mafia operates, and where we have no idea what the money sent there by European taxpayers has been spent on so far. The argument used by the European Union to circumvent the requirement for unanimity on this issue effectively renders any future statements by the European Union on the rule of law or democracy ridiculous and untrustworthy. The European Union is violating its own rules to such an extent that it is no longer a case of the horse's hooves, but the entire stable. The European Union argues that Russian assets must be frozen for a long time because the Russians are creating an energy emergency in Europe. This is a huge lie. I think it is unacceptable to treat people as if they were stupid to such an extent, even in Brussels. The energy crisis in the European Union is not being caused by the Russians, but by the fact that Brussels is currently banning Russian energy sources from Europe, and then using this as a pretext to create a legal basis, a non-existent legal basis for itself to circumvent the criterion of unanimity. So from this point on, this argument discredits and ridicules any statement by the European Union that concerns the functioning of the democratic institutions of any member state. And it discredits and ridicules any statement by the European Union regarding the so-called rule of law procedures in Hungary. It has been said that we were under enormous pressure today regarding Ukraine's EU membership. I would like to make it clear that we Hungarians do not regard EU membership as a security guarantee for Ukrainians, but as a threat of war for Europe. Ukraine's accession to the European Union would pose a huge threat of war for the entire European Union. We are not willing to assist in importing war into the European Union, a war madness that seeks to drag every European country into war. There is only one way for Hungary to stay out of all this, and that is for Hungary to continue to have a sovereign national government. Brussels' biggest problem at the moment is that it cannot drag Europe into war, and it cannot bring Ukraine into the European Union. And they cannot do so because we, the sovereign, national Hungarian government are currently preventing them from doing so. Now, as for the possible Russian countermeasures, I would like to clarify the following. Hungary does not support Brussels taking away Russia's frozen state assets. We do not support it. We do not support it for a number of reasons. We ask the Russians a clear question. If the European Union decides to seize the frozen Russian assets, will Russia's response be uniform across all EU member states? Or will it take into account the position of each member state on this issue? And the Russians' answer was clear. Regarding Australia, I can say the following. First of all, everyone was shocked by the news. We Hungarians find violent acts against religious groups unacceptable. We oppose all forms of terrorism and violence. And Hungary has a zero-tolerance policy towards anti-Semitism. We have expressed our condolences, and a letter has already been sent. Of course, we sympathize with the families of the victims. We wish the injured a speedy recovery, and the families much strength in the difficult period ahead. If you want this tightened for broadcast, neutralized or adapted for subtitles, just tell me the format.